Okay guys, here we are again. We did the video of the double Vanos engines. We're going to go ahead and do it on both the single Vanos, the M50 and M52. So under the hood here is the M52. This one is somewhat similar to the M54, but it's got some pretty subtle changes in it. We have the same CCV type situation. We have that hose going right there. That goes down to the CCV. If any of that's broken at all, that could cause a vacuum leak. Now, the CCV on this one sits up a little higher in the intake. It doesn't sit down at the bottom. This one's a lot easier to get to. You're also going to have you're going to have the line coming from the valve cover to the CCV. You're going to have the line coming from the oil dipstick, this CCV. This has the same oil ring on the dipstick where it plugs into the bottom of the block. If that oil ring is bad and leaking terribly and your CCV is still hooked up, you have not done the delete, that can leak vacuum at the dipstick and cause problems. So these engines have a little different intake boot on them. This one's up higher, a lot easier to get to. You could also have a problem here. This one, the ICV, the automatic control valve, does not, the intake boot does not go to that. So what we're going to look for is dry rot cracks in the ribs up here. Make sure your clamp's all tight. You go here on the bottom, there's going to be a hose. Instead of a little short scrunchy hose going to the automatic control, this one has a long hose and it's rubber. You're going to look for cracks right here in the boot coming up from that. Has a little plastic coupler and it goes to the rubber hose. You're going to want to inspect the rubber hose going down to the automatic control valve. Automatic control valve on this one sits right under the throttle body. So if you're having link codes, probably a good idea to go and pull the throttle body. This is a two-part throttle body. The first part comes off with 2 bolts up here, right there, and that's going to separate. So once you separated the throttle body, you're going to want to pull the throttle body off with 4 more bolts off the intake. You're going to inspect the gasket on the throttle body. At that point, once the throttle body is off, you can also see the CCV. You're going to inspect the hose going from the CCV over to the dipstick and make sure it's not ripped, make sure it's not leaking, make sure when you squeeze the hose like this one that it's firm and not real soft. This hose goes to the brake booster. This could also get cracks in it here. This one's actually missing a clamp. It seems not to make any difference. It needs to have one put on it. If you see any lines going this way, any cracks, you probably need to replace that hose also. One more thing you want to look for, there is a tank that sits on the bottom of this. That tank has a spout. Let's see if I can get in there and see it a little better for you guys. Over here has a rubber spout that goes down to the tank. A lot of times the rubber spout will have cracks on it coming up like that. If this boot has any cracks in it at all, it must be replaced. Okay, so on this one, it has a vacuum line going here that runs to the secondary air valve. A lot of times this little vacuum line here will get rotten. Check that. That turns into a metal line over here, and that goes over the secondary air valve right here. A lot of times this short piece of rubber will be deteriorated from the heat from the manifold, and this is almost identical valve to the M54. It has a 2-bolt flange. That flange will crack. That could cause the same link codes, cause all kinds of issues. Also, this is a 5 series, so the secondary air pump sits in the bumper. Okay, so these older ones have a rubber hose on it. This one's getting kind of, you can see I took my finger off of it, and you can see the indentation of my finger for a little bit. You're gonna look for any kind of cracks. If it's real soft and pliable, that will need to be replaced also. And the same as the M54, if you take this plate off, the fuel injectors are under that. The fuel injectors have 2 O-rings on them. You can take a little bit of carburetor cleaner. You can spray around those and make sure those aren't leaking. Make sure they're not leaking fuel. They can be leaking air, but not leaking fuel. Also, if you just want to do a quick once-over of this boot, you can take carburetor cleaner and spray around the boot. If the motor changes RPM at all, then that boot's bad. Okay, so here's a M50. M50 has the metal valve cover on it. It's the OBD1 version of the M52. It's kind of the same setup. These motors do not have a CCV. They just have a line that runs from the valve cover, It runs down up under the intake. That line is known for being bad. They get kind of deteriorated. You get cracks in them. It also has a plastic fitting right here that likes to get brittle and break. Has the same fitting on the underside of the intake. This does not have the CCV valve. These engines are a little bit simpler. They don't have near the I don't know, dramatic upkeep what the M52 and the higher models have. They don't have any of the emission stuff or very little emission stuff on them. As you can see over here on the side, it does not have the secondary air pump. It does not have the secondary air valve. It does have the little plate, but it's blocked off for the two bolt valve to go on the side. So on these, even the intake beats simpler. This does not have double throttle body at all. It does still have a similar boot, and you can see this one's actually ripped right there. You can see it. That's going to make it run like pretty much total crap. You can see on the other one, the sensor's a little bit different. The mass airflow is a little bit different. It does have basically exactly the same brake booster tube going to the brake booster. You also want to check that. You want to check for cracks or any kind of problems with that. These M50s also have a line. I'm not sure where this even goes. Down here it's a rubber vacuum line. You also need to check that. I'm not familiar enough with these M50s, or basically don't remember where that went to. So you also want to check the gasket for the throttle body and make sure all that's good. Now remember guys, that these M50 intakes, the whole manifold is a power upgrade for the M52. These runners are a lot bigger. The ports in the head are actually a lot bigger. I have used these M50 heads on M52 engines, and they seem to make a little more power. So just like the other cars, you spray around the injectors. If you think you have a problem with the O-rings on the injectors, all these cars could have a intake manifold gasket leak. That's not likely. If somebody has not had the manifold off of it, that's really rare to have a problem with that. They have pretty good gaskets on them. And on the M50s, they do not have a hose coming off the dipstick because there's no CCV. They do have an O-ring going into the block, but there's no vacuum held on it. So at that point, it's just a seal. So today's two videos are kind of similar, but then again, they're dramatically different. These engines are somewhat similar, but due to emissions and the changeover from the single dual vanos, when you go to look for vacuum leaks or have lien codes, everything is dramatically different on them. Anyway, that's all for today's video, guys. Hopefully this helps some of you guys out. I know lien codes are kind of a big deal in these cars. Anyhow, if you like today's video, give me a thumbs up, leave a comment. Also, don't forget to subscribe. Also, look me up on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, Nathan's DIY Garage. Thank you.